Thank you.
There you go.
Ready?
Are you a boss struggling, feeling overwhelmed with your increasing amount of workload? Hi, I'm Dr. Heather Williamson with Transformation Group, and we're a leadership consulting firm that believes every leader should be developed to their full potential. We listen to what the real challenges are causing you to feel burned out and customizing a coaching plan that guarantees success. If you're wanting to become a less stressed leader, call us at 804-598-9175 or check out our website at transformationgroupllc.com.
Good morning. I hope you have your cup of coffee because I know it's early, and sitting back in your chair, putting on your makeup or whatever actually you're doing at 5:30 in the morning. But while you were sitting there doing all that, I wanted to let you know I've got an amazing guest in the studio today. His name is Dave Saunders, the Chief Idea Officer. I kind of like that because it really works well with, the business at Madison and Maine.
Thank you.
So welcome. Dave.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate being here, and it's always good getting up early in the morning and having that second cup. I'll tell you a story about the Chief Idea Officer, and I tell people this all the time. When you own your own company, you get to call yourself whatever you want, and so I came up with that, and that's how it landed.
It landed perfectly because you are a brand communication agency, so it's all about getting the right message out there to the right people, right?
Yeah, and there's a third part. It's the right message to the right people at the right time.
Very good.
I realized that very early on after 30 years of being in this business. But yeah, Madison, Maine, coming up on our 17th anniversary later this month. And like every year, we'll celebrate by going out to the state fair. We're 17, which means that we're still not grown, but we figure out we should know a few things by now.
Well, 17 years and you made the Inc. 500. So that is something to be really congratulatory about.
Well, thank you. I like to take all the credit for hard people's work. Yes, this year. One thing I learned in business is that if you hire smart people, that's the first part of the equation, but you need to hire smart people. Then you need to get out of their way and let them do what they need to do. For the last 15 years, I hired a smart person whose name is Molly Whitfield.
Yeah.
Molly's been with me for 15 years. And in January of 2020, I turned the reins of Madison and Maine over to her. And, and she thanks me for this because it was 3 months before COVID. And,
and all the changes and pivoting that you had to do for that.
Absolutely. And she ended up doubling the size of the agency, and our growth has skyrocketed over the last couple of years. And we were fortunate enough to make the Fortune 5,000 list for one of America's fastest growing private companies. And as I said at my Rotary meeting this morning, yay, we're number 4440. So we barely made the list, but we're on the list.
You're on the list.
And very excited about that.
Exactly, as you should be. Plus, besides, running a brand marketing agency, you also are partners in actually now it's becoming a chain for you, a restaurant chain called the Texas Tea Room. I refer to it because when I was in Lynchburg, I used to live on Rivermont Avenue, right down the street from the Tea Room. And early in the morning, you always wanted a cheesy Western. I wanted them all the way. That's with the onions, but yeah.
So 2013 was a transformational year for me. One of the things that I wanted to do was go and invest in a few other companies and startups and some other companies. And the idea was pretty simple. One, a lot of companies and business owners have a good idea, but they don't have the means, they don't have the know-how, they don't have the technology to kind of bring them into the 21st century. And so I started Madison Avenue Investments in 2013, and I started investing in startups and other companies. And one of those investments was very uncharacteristic for me. 5 years ago, I learned that the beloved Texas Inn in our hometown of Lynchburg, Virginia, had 2 locations, and it wasn't doing so well. and people were scared. And this beloved institution where you got a
Mhm.
cheesy Western, where I walked in when I when I was 5 years old, was one of my earliest memories of going there, and I had grown up with it all of my life.
Mhm.
I had the opportunity to buy the restaurants, and I did, and so we bought new equipment. We got a website. We got on social media. We got a new POS system, and we really kind of changed some of the culture without changing the feeling, the atmosphere, the menu, and just improving things. And turned it around and had very successful growth over the next 2 years that I owned the restaurant. And then COVID came along, kicked us right in the pants.
Mhm.
But we had very, very loyal clientele, and they continued to order food.
Because it's
Uh,
good food.
it's yeah, it's and I'll tell you the success. The restaurant business. My grandfather was in it. He was successful to a certain degree, but I learned as much from people in business that did things that they shouldn't have done as the ones that I followed that they did it the right way. My grandfather at one point had 3 restaurants. He retired in 1979, and he sold the pots and pans, and he didn't have anything to sell. He didn't have a restaurant, didn't have a continuing operation. Basically,
Mhm.
he retired by quitting. He was a quintessential owner operator. He
Mhm.
didn't have a brand, he didn't have a plan, he didn't have anything that was really going to survive him. And those restaurants died along with his retirement plans. Um, the Texas Inn is a special breed. It's been around since 1935, and I'm the fifth owner. Um, and I'm a new owner, but I have a server that's been there for 43 years. I have another one
Mhm.
that's been there for 41 years. And that sort of continuity and that sort of customer loyalty comes along because of 3 things. I don't want to get too professorial about this, but it's good, fast, and cheap. Now you go somewhere and you say, "Hey, I want to have a deck put on the back of my house," and they say, "Oh," and the contractor says, "Well, do you want it good and fast? Well, it ain't going to be cheap. You want it cheap and fast? It's not going to be any good." And the
Yeah.
project manager's conundrum, right? Or
Yes.
the iron triangle, as they call it. We give people good food, we serve it to them fast, and we serve it to them at a reasonable price, and they love us because we give them all 3 things that the customer wants.
Mhm.
And you manage to do that, you're going to have lifelong fans. And so I took a picture the other day of 4 generations of one family sitting there at the counter having some chili dogs, and
Mhm.
that was a blast for
Is
me.
it still like just small counters, like 10 seats or whatever, like it
We
is?
serve 1,500 people, 15 at a
There you
time.
go, 15 bar stools. Yeah, the little round circle ones.
We've
Um,
expanded in Harrisonburg to
which is a brand new
18. Yes,
location.
we've been open 3 weeks, and we
Mhm.
have 18 seats
I like
in
it.
Harrisonburg.
I like it. So when it comes to you're the king of marketing, what should business owners, is it different for the small business owner, entrepreneur versus, let's say, a larger company? What are the questions that they should be asking if they are wanting to be more successful in marketing their business?
That's a big, tough question to ask. And one of the things that I do,
But you're the man to do it.
yeah, well, one of the things is I say that there's an order of things. When someone has a company and they said so and so is the head of sales and marketing, well, that's not true. You can't have person be the head of both, because marketing and sales are different processes, and
Mm-hmm.
sales can't ever come before marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something else magically that comes before marketing. There's a process to it. There's branding, there's
Mm-hmm.
marketing, and then there's sales. And all 3 of those are distinct channels. Number one, as a business owner, you have to understand the value of all 3. Um, I also, and the value at which branding and marketing is important to your company depends on how you view your company. A lot of entrepreneurs are owners, and they don't work on the business, they work in the business.
Mm-hmm.
They're the owner operator,
Right.
and they're the I do everything myself. And the first thing I say is, you've got to give up some of those things that you aren't good at. And number one, you're not good at branding. And number 2, you're not good at marketing, and you might be good at sales.
Yeah.
So you probably just need to outsource that to someone.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on the size of the company, they're going to, so I say, regardless of your size, seek professional help when it comes
Yes.
to branding, marketing, because you're probably good at selling widgets. All right. but you're probably not good at making a widget brand, a widget website, a social media campaign for your widgets, radio, billboard, TV advertising, direct mail, all the other things that go into marketing your widgets. And so you need some help. Now, if you're a small company, you might have to go get, I know a guy, right? And or I know a gal, and that's fine. But at some point when you do that and you grow to the point where you're managing 3 or 4 or 5 different I know a guys, then it's time to go get a full service solution with an agency. So I like to say that Madison and Maine is between I know a guy and the Martin agency, which handles Geico and Walmart and the rest of them.
Right. Big
So
boys.
we're in that mid-market segment between small and mid-sized companies, and we're kind of the answer to I know a guy.
I know, I like it. I know a guy. So when it comes to marketing, how do you, because everything is online now. Like I post this on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And it'll go on my YouTube channel. So how do businesses get more visible online? What suggestions would you have?
Well, I actually wrote a blog about this last week. It's really great. Or I think it's great because I think every blog that I write is great. But no, seriously, one of the easiest things that you can do for a business is something that almost 40% of businesses out there have not even done right now. When I want to look for a product or service, 25 years ago, I had to ask someone, I had to go look it up in a book. I had to do
the yellow pages.
The yellow pages. I had to go to some sort of resource guide to find it. Now I can find it in 0.063 seconds by simply typing it into Google. So if I say I'm going to Google something, that means I'm going to look for something. And 85% of all search goes through one search engine, Google. There is a free thing on Google called Google My Business. And you just Google the phrase Google My Business, and it'll walk you through the steps of how to put your free listing on Google. So if people are looking for your widgets, let's call them, and they say widgets near me or widgets Chesterfield, Virginia, you will pop up in the directory listings for free if your company has a Google My Business profile that's completely filled out. That's one of the easiest, cheapest, most effective ways of doing that.
So just to let you know, I'm going to go do that later today.
It's a great, I wrote the blog, I think it was last Friday. I had something like 29 responses through the email saying, hey, can I ask you more about this? And so I spent, the rest of the afternoon replying to people and saying, here's the link, here's how to do it yourself. There are things that you can DIY. There are things that you can do to make your company more visible on the #1 search engine. That's one of them. The second thing is, I also say with a website, don't use a free website builder.
Yeah.
Free,
Definitely,
you're going to get what you pay for.
Exactly.
It's just a bad idea. And if you're paying more money for landscaping than you did for your website, your priorities are out of whack. 17 people might have seen your landscaping today, but there's 7 billion people on the planet that could actually see your website. So it's a matter of priority for a small business person. Get a website, seek professional help, find someone that's going to build it the right way. And then after that, don't treat it as a project, treat it as a process. Marketing is a continual process that changes by day, by week, by month. And if you actually just put up a website and you put up a social media platform and you, what I call Ron Popeil, set it and forget it, it's just going to stay there in time, frozen. And you need to update it with content. You need to update it with keywords and H1 tags and all these things that are a part of the search engine optimization process. That's the #1 thing is that 1, you need a website. 2, you need to optimize it. And then 3, after that, then you need to market the website in front of people at the right place at the right time. And so people can find your product or service.
How do you know what's the right time?
Well, that really depends on the client. As you know, like with the restaurants, we just launched a campaign for the restaurants to get so the right people, young people, out at bars, late at night, after 9 o'clock and before 2 o'clock in the morning.
God, that was me.
Right?
I was living in Lynchburg.
Exactly.
That's why I knew that restaurant so
And
well.
that's why the cheesy Western is God's gift to drunk people. It is the original hangover food. It's like heaven on a bun.
It is, Mike, it is so true.
It is the thing. And that's the thing. So one, we know our audience. Okay. That's why we're open till 2 o'clock on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday nights. This campaign is delivered through Facebook, through Instagram, and it targets them with the right creative. It says, come by, the other guys are closed, we're open late. And so that's an example of the right time. We're posting these ads between 9 p.m. and 1:30 a.m. to drive traffic to all three restaurants at night. So that's a great example of having it at the right time. People ask me about my email all the time, my newsletter. This is the 13th year that I've been doing the newsletter, 8,500 subscribers. And people say, well, why do you send it out at Friday at 3 o'clock? And I'm like, because no one else does. No one else sends an email out at 3 o'clock on a Friday. Well, why do you do that? Well, it's originally for business owners and professionals. And so a lot of them read it on Saturdays and Sunday afternoons. My highest open rates are Sunday afternoons, not Friday at 3 o'clock. I will get more responses on a Sunday afternoon than I will at 3:05 on a Friday. And the open rates are higher than if I sent it out at 8 a.m. on a Monday, because there's 100 other companies sending out a newsletter at 8 a.m. on a Monday morning. And
I wouldn't think Monday would not be the day to send it out anyway.
And you wouldn't want to sift through it to find it, but finding that timing is really an exercise in understanding the psychology and the habits and the needs and the wants of an audience.
And so how would they get on your mailing list?
Oh, that's easy. Then go to madisonmaine.com and click subscribe to the weekly report, the world famous weekly report. And like I like to mention, it's absolutely free. That's the best four-letter word in marketing, FREE. But yeah, in all seriousness, it's ramblings, marketing and branding tips, and usually an update on events going on in the Richmond area. And so happy to have you subscribe. Or you can just Google Madison, Maine Weekly Report. You'll find it there.
Oh, perfect. All right. So when it comes to branding, I always think, like when I was pregnant with my son, I craved Wendy's hamburgers. I don't know what it was, but I craved Wendy's hamburgers. And so I knew that I could go to any Wendy's. It didn't matter where I was, where I happened to be at the time. I always expected it would be the same quality of hamburger.
Yeah.
So when it comes to branding, what besides, being consistent, I would think, and recognition, what's really important about branding that people should know about?
I will admit that I had a complete and addiction to Wendy's hamburgers as well. And at the time, I spent 11 years in Los Angeles, and a year after I moved there, the franchise owner for West Los Angeles lost his franchise, and they closed all the Wendy's down. And I was in a Wendy's desert. Right?
Oh my God.
I had to drive like 30 miles to go see a Wendy's. And when I came back home, the first thing I did when I got off the plane was like, hey, I want to go to Wendy's. I want to get a square hamburger. In the food service sector, or really in any sector, what you're looking at is you're looking for consistency of product and quality and service. And people focus on that. Your owner operator will focus on that, make sure that that's consistent. They have the same experience, and they have the same recipe, and they have the same thing. And with Wendy's, it was Dave's way, right? Dave Thomas had a way of kind of putting that together, and he was kind of the name and the face and everything else behind the company. The key is also in branding. And and McDonald's and companies like that, and Wendy's and others, there's great examples in the fast food sector of why brands are so important. You have brands like McDonald's that are rooted in process. Everywhere you go, it's always going to be consistent. But the one thing about the branding is you're never going to see like a dark green M over top of a building. It's always going to be the golden arches.
Right.
And the branding between that and the physical products and the bags and the marketing that they do on television, everything is all incredibly consistent, and they have centralized control over that brand. And if you look at very, very successful brands, they do have that, especially in the franchise model. Wendy's has had that too, but Wendy's style of being number two is what I call the challenger brand strategy. Going back to the 80s when the little old lady said, "Where's the beef?" and
I remember that.
and those ads, they were pointing a finger straight at their competitor McDonald's, saying, "You guys have this little tiny little hamburger here," and Wendy's was advertising these quarter-pound square burgers, and they took on the giant. And a lot of challenger brands these days are scared to take on number one. And I think that was one of the reasons why Wendy's was so successful and has been so successful since. Dave Thomas died. He's not in the ads anymore, that sort of thing. Wendy's is my idol in social media. Have you seen what they post on social media? They are like a Comedy Central roast. They will lay the smack down on any sort of stupidity on Twitter, and people love it. And I love it too. I think that they've got a great approach to it. And when you're number one, you can kind of sit and rest on your laurels a little bit. But if you're number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 17, you got to get a little feistier. And I think that Wendy's brand voice is definitely the epitome of that feistiness.
Well, what also when it comes to brands, how would somebody figure out how to create that identity that they want for their business?
Yeah, a lot of times people are looking at it as a brand in a very limited sense, as opposed to branding in a very general sense. The branding is not just the logo or the visual identity elements of a company. Branding is all of the things that set up the expectation in the minds of a consumer. So that could be the logo and the website and the clothing that someone wears, or the smile on their face, the way that the product or is packaged and delivered. All those things encompass branding, and that sets for the expectation. And there's only three kinds of brands. There's going to be a positive, a neutral, or a negative connotation to a brand. I've often said there's three kinds of brands. There's brands you know and love, brands you know and don't love, and brands you never heard of. There's only three. Right. So, and examples, I get teased all the time for this, but that could be, Apple, right? People love Apple products, they know them, they love them. Comcast, they could say, well, I know them, but I don't love them because the cable guy didn't show up between 11 and 5 like he was supposed to. And then number 3 is brands you never heard of. XYZ Plumbing of Mechanicsville.
Right.
I don't even know if there's an XYZ Plumbing of Mechanicsville, but if
we'll have to Google it.
We'll have to Google it and find out. The strategy for number 1 is everybody knows you and everybody loves you, and that doesn't happen by accident. The strategy for number 2 is change your name to Xfinity. Or change your name to something else, because you have to. And a lot of the companies that have let down customers have to rebrand as something else. And then the strategy for number 3, XYZ Plumbing in Mechanicsville, is go contact, I know a guy or an agency or someone like that to change your name, get yourself a new visual identity, new website, so people can be made aware of you.
Yeah. So people will know your brand and know you and want to follow you.
And I know it sounds extraordinarily oversimplification here, but you have to have a brand first before you can have brand awareness. They don't go hand in hand a lot of times. The bad part about it is I have competitors and I have folks in my industry that are so focused on creating it, they just kind of go, okay, great, we've got it done. Now what? Well,
you got to get it out there.
You got to get out there. You actually have to market
the
company after the branding is done. But that's those are the big things, I think, for most business owners, small, mid-sized businesses. They really need to focus on the visual and the messaging elements and building out the brand, and again, making the entire brand identity something that is compelling, that people are drawn to.
So you really focus on bold ideas. Explain bold ideas.
So one of the things, if you think about it, bold ideas, bold people, bold brands, there's an attraction element to them.
Mm-hmm.
John F. Kennedy said, "We are going to put a man on the moon by the end of this decade." And he said that 8 years before we actually landed. And it gave this big, giant, bold idea. And everybody said, "Okay, cool." And they did it. The Nobody ever faults a business owner for dreaming too big. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
I think you got to have dreams and big dreams.
And I think that part of the thing that holds them back is that small business owners think small, in many, many instances. The main thing that we mean by that is, one, to get out of that cycle, you need to start thinking big. And then I used the Wendy's example a few minutes ago. If Wendy's response to McDonald's or their other competition was, "Hey, we're just another hamburger place, blah, blah, we don't," it didn't talk about that they were better or fresher, that they didn't freeze the burgers, that
Mhm.
they're old fashioned style hamburgers, and there's Dave's way, and that we're going to do it this way, and the customer's always right, and you can basically create your burger however you want it, and we're going to have top quality things all the way through. And it was a real quality that's instilled in the brand. Those sort of things are incredibly important because at the heart of brand is the brand promise.
Mhm.
That's an implied promise from the company to the consumer that we are going to not let you down. We're
Mhm.
going to make you a great food, or we're going to deliver a great widget to you. You have to, bold brands are companies that keep their promises.
Mhm.
All right. And
I
they
like
keep,
that.
they
I like
keep,
that.
they keep their companies.
Mhm.
They keep their clients satisfied. But when they make bold decisions in their branding and their marketing and their communications and that sort of thing, then they get away from the rest of the herd.
Mhm.
98% of all business is small business, and about 1% of those are actually do something that's worth talking about. The best form of marketing is word of mouth. And I hear this all the time. "Oh yeah, we do word of mouth." I'm like, "Oh, okay. Well, what are you doing to get them talking?" And they have no response. "Well,
Mhm.
we're doing this." Well, so is everybody else. You have to do something that gets people talking. And whether it's making a square hamburger
Mhm.
like Wendy's, or putting an ad on television that makes fun of your primary rival because they cut the size of their burger by 30%. Those are examples of how bold brands win.
Yeah.
And for every company, they have to find out, what is the differentiator? What is that one thing that makes us different and better and more wonderful than all the other competitors?
Mhm.
And then they have to hammer that home. And then they have to do it in very bold and innovative ways.
So you're an entrepreneur. I'm an entrepreneur. And I remember when, let's say put out my shingle.
Mhm.
It was right in 2008, the darn recession
Oh,
hit.
yeah.
I'd gotten my PhD from VCU, and I was looking into companies under their talent management umbrella. Oh, it's going to be great. I'm going to find a job, where I can do, leadership, executive coaching and all this. Well, no one was hiring. Oh my
Right.
Lord, they were
Yeah.
shutting down businesses around here. So my husband, who was an entrepreneur, he owns a general contracting company, and like him and like myself, he decided to go out on his own because he's like, I can do it better.
Mhm.
And I don't have to deal with the BS, that he had to deal with. For me, it was, oh my gosh, there's nobody hiring, what am I going to do? So I hung out my own sugar, and we'll just see what happens. Well, 15 years later, I'm still around.
There you go.
So when it comes to being an entrepreneur and deciding to throw out your, company sign, what are some things that you really need to think about from a branding perspective, marketing perspective, to really get the people to come to your door, find you, like obviously a website, but
Right.
to find your service or your product?
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned that too. recession, and whether we're in one or not right now.
We are in one.
Okay, it depends on who you ask,
Yes,
but the
yes.
definition is 2 successive quarters of negative
Exactly.
GDP growth,
Which we've had.
which means that we're in a recession right now. And so people say, oh gosh, it's a recession. The recession is the best time to start a company.
Mhm.
And you look at this historically and whatever else. So the cycle is people have layoffs, qualified people go down, they hang out their own shingle, and you
Mhm.
start seeing that. Little did we know back
Yeah.
in 2008 that this was the Great Recession. This was the monstrous 4.5, almost 5-year recession that literally almost probably was a depression,
Mhm.
but we didn't allow it to call. Weren't allowed to call it that. So it is a good time to start a company. There's no better time to start a company than now, because one, the expectations are off and that sort of thing. But what I do is I counsel budding entrepreneurs all the time. I'm investing in new companies. I invested in one recently and got that off the ground. And one of the things that I did was saying, like, one, you never have a second chance to make a first impression.
Mhm.
And so if you have the wherewithal, having the right name, logo, identity statement, tagline, core messaging, mission, vision, values, all of the words, the website, the tri-panel brochure, the business cards, all the collateral material, having all these systems in place built ahead of time and getting it right the first time saves you from having to, one, go out of business, and two, having to redo that a year, 2, 3 from now. If you're lucky, 4 out of 5
Mhm.
businesses that start do not make it to year 2.
Mhm.
And if I had to evangelize anything in this world to small business owners and entrepreneurs and startups, it's please seek professional help and get it done right when you start,
Yeah.
because it'll save a lot of time and headache and money later on when you do it. Now, I understand for some it's a shoestring budget. You're starting up, you're trying to figure out what you got in the bank and everything else. But even if you have to hire the neighbor kid to build a website, and if you have to hire the friend of the friend to help you with the branding, at least do it, because it's going to be a whole lot better than what you do yourself,
Right.
because homemade branding is absolutely ugly. And it's not like homemade baking where, like, oh yeah, grandma's cornbread's going to taste great, but man, oh man, look at that skillet she's baking it in. It's pretty ugly.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's home cooking, especially on the branding and marketing side, usually doesn't work. So that's the number one piece of advice I give to folks.
What about a business name? Because some people put their names on as their business. And then others people like, transformation group. I had a
Yeah.
thought process behind that because I'm transforming people.
Absolutely.
With yours.
Yeah. My piece of advice there is that please do not name it after a geographic object. Don't call it River City. Don't call it Blue Ridge.
Yeah.
Don't call it Commonwealth. There are so many. If I say the word James River,
Mhm.
I can think of like 5 brands off the bat
Yeah.
that I can, okay, James River
Uh-huh.
this, James River equipment, James River
Yeah.
heating and air.
Mhm.
But so you're doing yourself a disservice by calling it RVA something or calling it whatever that's after some sort of geographic modifier. The second worst
You're
thing,
also limiting yourself.
you are really limiting yourself later on,
Mhm.
because we just ran into this with a company that provides commercial services here in Virginia. Well, they're expanding to Maryland and North Carolina.
But they don't want to be RVA.
They don't want to be Virginia blank,
Yeah.
because you can't do that. So two, it's just not a good idea. But the other thing is, transformation group, you said, is through a process and it goes to the end product that you're delivering.
Mhm.
Great. All right. And that's an important part of the process. But it would be much less of an effective brand if it was named your name.
Dr. Heather Williamson.
Yeah, Dr.
Yeah.
Heather
Who
Williamson,
is that?
Consulting group,
Consulting.
LLC.com, and
Especially if you're trying to sell it.
yes, well, that's another thing, is like getting somebody's domain and they say, well, it's XYZ Plumbing XYZ Plumbing of Mechanicsville LLC.com. I'm like, well, nobody cares about the LLC or the INC except for the SCC, the State Corporation Commission.
They get their $50 check every year.
Yeah, they get the $50 check. That nobody cares about that. So getting something that's memorable and it's short and sweet, and it's really more about your customer or about your product or about your service and less about you. Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, most professional service firms, whether it's law or accounting or whatever else, they get to the point where they have 12 different partners and they can't have all the names. And so the first two partners are the ones that they shorten it to. But yeah, if I was going to start a law firm or an accounting firm or something else, I would name it something other than just the partner names, because those days are kind of gone.
Yeah. So what one piece of advice would you have before you leave, this morning and get your day started?
One piece of
advice that you would want the listeners to know about when it comes to, your chief idea officer role.
That's a real tough one, because somebody that dispenses advice and ideas and just narrowing it down to one, I would probably just go back to what we said earlier. Be bold. Fortune favors the bold. If I could get across any idea, and it's really simple, 3 words: bold brands win. If you're looking at the day and you're looking at the calendar and you're like, what am I going to do today to make my company take some bolder decisions, to get a bolder look, to get try some bolder tactics, or put together a bolder strategy for our marketing, for our branding, and for our sales funnel. Think of it that way, and then the pieces will start falling into place. My parting wisdom here is that every single entrepreneur takes a gamble when they start a business. And if you think about it this way, are you just making the one big gamble, or is the entrepreneurial journey like a really big poker tournament? Okay, imagine that if you took your chips and you put them all in on the first hand, and then you won, and then you just sat there and you put the ante in, and you never made another move, you never made another bet, and you just lost every hand until the pile went away. I think a lot of business owners are like that, and they're scared to make that second or third or fourth big bet on themselves and on their company. And not like I'm equating business ownership to gambling or poker playing, but you can make the bold move. You can bluff once in a while. You can do something that's going to change the game so you can win. And don't be afraid to just sit there with your pile of chips.
There you go.
How's that?
I think that's excellent piece of advice. So one last way, how can people get in touch with you if they, want to get on your newsletter, if they want to reach out? How would they reach you?
Well, one of the things I've never been able to say before is just Google Dave Saunders.
Oh my goodness.
But yeah, if you Google Dave Saunders, prior to that, you would get the MSNBC commentator, Dave Mudcat Saunders, who ran John Edwards' campaign for president, or you get others. There's a country singer and a famous photographer and several different football players and whatever. There's like 6,600 Dave Saunders. But I'm thankful to say, if you actually just Google Dave Saunders in Google, I should be the first result. Dave Saunders, Madison in Maine, MadisonMaine.com is our website. Check us out there. And you can, or even if you're not on the web, you want to call, it's 877 MAD-MAIN, MADMAIN. Either one, we'd love to talk to you, see if we can help you out. Drop by the website, MadisonMaine.com, sign up for the newsletter, and let me hear from you.
Awesome. All right, well, that's going to do it for us today. Thank you for listening to Talking Leadership with Dr. Heather Williamson, your leadership doc, on ESPN 106.1 FM. You will be hearing me again next Monday morning. Just to let you know, I do work with leaders to help them overcome performance challenges by increasing their effectiveness, lowering their stress, and giving them more free time and higher profits by 20 to 30%. So if this is of interest to you, check out my website at transformationgroupllc.com. Thank you again.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thanks for having me in.
Bye. I don't know where he is, but he'll hit his
There you
thing.
go. That was easy and
I
flowing. Thanks for the great
know.
questions. Hope I added some value to this
I
morning.
think you did some excellent value.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, thanks.
Sweet.
And we'll promote that on our channels and get in there up and early on ESPN radio. I've already got it on my dial. Yeah, I check it out once in a while. My new thing is that I swing back and forth between WRVA and
Oh,
public
John
radio.
Reed.